Hello out there in the real world. I think this is like the third video that I'm making. Uh, I'm starting to feel like I'm being subpoenaed by intergalactic court system or something, right? In the sense of making my case of my plea in front of the universal beings of the galaxy, right? I mean, because we are dealing with the internet and inner space and things of that nature, right? So, with being that said, I'm going to today use the umbrella, an alien umbrella, right? Basically, I'm gonna let my higher avatar just govern my words and my thoughts, right? Because I have to really be careful because the subject matter that I want to expound on today is the opposite of the one that I expounded on yesterday, which was love. And we know the opposite of love is hate, right? So I want to expound on that because I feel like in today's time, that subject matter is like really relevant, right? Because we're in the era now where people drive or more motivated off of hate energy than love energy, right? Because I guess in some sense they feel like love energy is a little too passive, right? And we are living in an era where people identify themselves on a negative vibe as far as characteristics is concerned. Like you have people that call themselves toxic, you have people that call themselves savages, right? And every time I hear that type of labeling being passed around, right, I kind of like my inner self laugh a little bit because I'm like, yo, how much the world has like drastically changed in like 30 years. Like in 30 years, if a person was to say that they're toxic and like profess to that, like the world and the space that it was in at that time would look at a person crazy because a lot of us was influenced by movies and television shows and things of that nature, right? That played a really big part in our everyday lives, right? Growing up. And every time we heard the term toxic, toxic was like nobody like that's like a horror story being toxic because it's like anytime we got a scene of a toxic situation, it was always on some disclosed military compound where you have your drums of chemicals and the chemicals spill and affects the environment. That was a toxic, right? And now people wear that term being toxic as a badge of honor, right? As well as savage, right? And it's like really, really crazy because when you're dealing with that word savage and you're dealing with American culture, right? Because words have they have energy and they have passes attached to it, right? So we gotta be kind of like we gotta be careful. We gotta be careful in the sense of what we use to place over ourselves. I remember reading years ago in the Bible say that a good name is worth like a pot of gold, right? So you want to be careful with names that you place yourself under, right? And savage, when you're dealing with American history, as we know, the white colonizers, when they came over here and they basically did what they did, right? We're not going to dwell on that, right? But they basically used the term savage in the people that they were considered their ops or who they were in opposition with, right? So it's like really funny that people call themselves savages now, right? But you know, to each his own. But I want to deal with like hate, right? Me growing up, I can honestly say I can't recall one individual that I actually ever hated in my entire life. Like I was explaining to somebody the other day, right? And they were like really bashing the young generation, you know, like their tight clothes and things of that nature, right? And I was explaining to that individual, I said, the difference between Generation X and Generation Millenniums is this simple reality, right? Generation X, we grew up, we idolized and we worshiped our stars, right? The newer generation, they are the stars. They like we are the stars. You dig what I'm saying? So it's a little difference in the psychology varies a little bit, right? And one is more passive. It causes one to be more passive one way, and the other way causes one to be more aggressive. But when you're dealing with those two systems, we got to be careful not to demonize neither one because it's all energy, and certain energy is needed for certain situations, right? So, like, even dealing with love and hate, right? It's a season for everything, right? It's a time to be this and it's a time not to be that, right? So when saying that, and when you really like dig like really deep into things, right? That's probably the misunderstanding of that is probably one of humans' greatest Achilles heels, right? Because you have a lot of people who don't accept both, right? So they're actually circulating in this world is unbalanced. And what I mean by that is you have people that are like totally good. Like they strive. Well, nobody's totally good, but they strive and they put out the persona like they're just like righteous and they're just like totally good. And the reality of that is actually a delusional mind state. And versus that people that think that they're like just like totally evil. That in itself is contradiction when you understand the atomic structure of everything that's on this planet or on the material realm, us included, because we inhabit physical bodies, right? That have an atomic structure because our physical body is matter composed of atoms. So when we get deep and we analyze atoms or the components, the elements that make up an atoms are made up of three different elements or three different particles, right? You have your proton, your electron, and your neutron, right? And we know if you study basic science, basic biology, and things of that nature, we know and understand that an electron has a negative charge and a proton has a positive charge, right? So, that being part of our corporate structure, we have a tendency of fluctuating between the two energy sources, right? Now, to get into a deeper science of it, as you get older and if you become wiser, right, you know and understand you want to be at the center point of everything that you do. You want to be centered. You know what I mean? Like you'll hear people say, don't live in the past, don't live in the future, be living the now. That's that center part. That's that in atomic structure. That's actually that neutron because a neutron doesn't give off any type of electrical spark, right? And I find myself more occupying that neutral space when dealing with things, dealing with this world, right? And I find a lot of people make accusations or they'll accuse me of things like, yo, you're straddling the fence, you're playing both sides when you finesse two times joint, right? It's funny though because that's actually not the case in point. That's a part of evolving. That's a part of getting in tune with yourself and getting in tune with elements of the universe, right? So in saying that, dealing with love and hate, right? Love would be considered part of that positive charge, pardon me, part of that proton, right? And hate would be the electron, right? So, and when you study an atom, the neutron separates both or keep both of them from touching each other because when you study atoms and you know when those two energies get close together, they cause a spark. They cause a tiny explosion, right? And you can see it in everyday life, like when you're in your positive thing and you in your positive bag, and people come around you and come in your circumference, and they with the negative energy, it automatically causes an explosive response, whether one lets it out or it causes an internal like response that it's explosive, right? But I think one of the major points that I have with the world is how people are taught to pick a side. Because that's a bunch of malarkey and that's a bunch of bull crap, that's a bunch of poppycock, that's a bunch of nonsense, right? Because if you really look at it, right, and if you really occupy that neutral space, right, that neutral space is a clear space, whereas though it's not affected by the proton or electron. And we find when we navigate in this earth, right, when you do pick a side, you're on automatic opposition of another side, right? And this creates a conflict, whether it comes out physically, psychologically, or even spiritually, right? And this is why my personal belief or my hypothesis is you have a lot of individuals walking around this earth, right? They're dissatisfied. It's just a whole lot of internal turmoil coming out, and then when it spills out into the physical realm, it always creates a mess. You know what I mean? Whether it's for one individual or another. So in doing that, I think that that is very detrimental to the evolution or the evolving of people in this world, right? So with dealing with hate, right? Me growing up, like I said in my previous video, I always been a lover, right? So if you would have probably told me like 5 years ago or 10 years ago that I never succumbed to hate, right? I will argue you down, right? Until I was like blue in the face, like, yo, not me, because I've been through different avenues of living, right? Like I lived the street life before, right? And I dealt with underworld individuals, right? And in the underworld, there's a tendency of being a lot of hate, right? Especially if one has managed to figure out certain things and how their movement is, if their movement is flawless. You know what I'm saying? People have a tendency of hating whether your car, your clothes, you're just immaculate, your significant other, and things of that nature, right? And I was always the type of individual ever since I was young. I never felt those type of emotions towards another person because like I said, my essence, I was a lover. So me being a lover, right? I just love things. Like I love to see people clean. I love to see people looking nice. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if I like my psychology was if I seen a guy with a beautiful female, right? I my the hate never rose in my psyche. I would look at it as like I would just use my analytical mind and I would study everything about that guy. You know what I'm saying? As far as the things that I felt like let him receive that blessing of a beautiful female, right? And then I would study the female as well, right? And then the conclusion that I would get from my study is like I would either extract from that person's life certain things and I would incorporate it in my life, but never did hate evolve or come out of that process, right? Because I'm a firm believer is whatever somebody else have, if you dedicate enough time and energy and focus enough, you can have the same thing, right? I never I'm talking I was like that in my early teens. So I always thought like that, right? So in saying that and dealing with hate though, right? I always looked down on hate. Like I always looked at people that succumb to hate. In certain levels, I looked at them as being weak individuals, right? And then I could remember some years back seeing a video of the former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson, right? And he was doing an interview. I forget which show it was on, but the subject matter came with the energy that he likes to project on the females that he deal with, basically dealing in the bedroom, right? And this shit kind of like blew my cat back. Like, and he was basically telling, I think the interview asked him, was he a major lover in the bedroom? And he was saying like his psychology was with dealing with a female. He was like, man, I don't want no female to show me love. You know what I'm saying? He was like, I don't want your love because I got so much love that I just want to devour you with my love. And I mean, that it was a little way out there, but I was like, it just made me look at the whole hate thing different. He was like, I want a female to hate me, right? And I was just like, yeah, on certain levels, it was some sadistic type shit, but it just made me look at hate, that subject matter hate a little different, right? And I realized as I got older, I had to go deep, deep, deep in the sense of finding what part of hate resonates with me, right? And you know what I figured out about myself? I do hate, right? The thing is with me though, I don't hate individuals. You know what I'm saying? I encountered hate from a more intellectual, philosophical perspective, right? Like me in my quest, of course, being African American, we have this whole thing because of the ramifications of slavery of we just want to be free, right? So I associated anti-freedom with hate. So I start at first it was just like a rebellion, right? When I start reading different things and learning different thoughts and ideologies and philosophies in the world, and I really became open to a lot of different stuff. I start being in opposition of hate, right? Because I looked at hate as being oppressive. You know what I mean? And I just wanted to be free. Like it was worth it because I went to war with hate on those levels, on an intellectual level, and now I can. It's safe to say that like intellectually, I'm free. You know what I'm saying? Like and with that the reward, my personal opinion came that neutral space, right? So like I give you a prime example. I had a conversation with an individual yesterday, right? And we were conversing and he was like, yeah, he was actually talking about white people and he was like, yeah, them pilgrims, right? And he was going in, you know, he went into his deep Minister Farrakhan, Malcolm X bag, right? And don't get me wrong, if that's what you into, that's what you into, right? And normally, me taking a neutral position, right? A lot of people might not understand the position that I take, and they might think that I'm being crafty or straddling the fence because I'll engage an individual on that specific dialogue on their level. So I might start off by saying, yeah, man, but if you really know and you really understand, like, yo, everything that is being done to us, we actually did it and we actually created that system, right? And the individual, I do that because I'm always, whenever I interact with somebody, I'm always trying to broaden their horizon and how they think, right? So if I am being manipulative or being crafty, it's in that sense because I don't believe manipulation is 100% bad, and I don't believe manipulation is 100% good. And what I mean by that is manipulation is a tool. Of course, if you use it for bad, then that's what it becomes. It becomes evil. It can become hateful. It can become a lot of things. But manipulation can also not be stigmatized and have a stigma on it, and it can also be seen as good. Prime example, a lot of parents, they manipulate all the time with their children, right? But they manipulate their children to do for the benefit and the betterment of that child. Like prime example, you could be in a supermarket and you could be in a cereal aisle and your little child could be like, mommy or daddy, I want this cereal. And you know that cereal is loaded with a bunch of sugar, has absolutely no nutritional value, that's going to serve as a substance for that child, and that child's going to grow and be strong, and it's going to help complement the intellectual growth and things of that nature, right? And you might want the child to eat some healthy cereal, right? So then you got to find ways in your mind to try to manipulate the child. Well, an intelligent parent would, to manipulate the child and take in the most healthy choice, right? And there's different levels how you can manipulate a child into doing that. So I always was a subscriber, pardon me, I was always a subscriber to good manipulation is wholesome, is a good thing, right? And dealing with hate, when does hate actually become a good thing, right? In my personal opinion, hate is like a lion, right? A lion. And love at the same time could be a lion as well, right? And when you study ancient times and royals and you see royal thrones and chairs, they chairs used to be crafted and have lion paws at the bottom of the legs of the chair, right? And a lot of people don't understand where that actually came from, right? And that actually came from a myth or a story, I don't know if it's true or not, of Alexander the Great. And they said Alexander the Great, his father, I believe was King Philip, right, a Macedonian, he put his son through a hell of a regiment, like psychologically as well as physically, and grooming him to be the next leader. Like I believe he had, as in his youth, he had Aristotle as a personal teacher. But they said one of the stories that always like stuck out to me. They said his father used to make him sleep in a place where it was two lions. He had to sleep into between two lions chained up, right? And he had to get comfortable with being in that center, or being in that playing the fence, or just being in that neutral space, right? And I look a lot like love and hate at times for us can represent those two lions, right? Those two ferocious lions, because we can be devoured by love and we can be devoured by hate. It's just that they're on different sides. So how they devour an individual could be totally different, right? Like I feel like right now I'm being devoured by love, right? But how does love devour one, right? You'd be like, how can love actually hurt? Like I said in the video yesterday, love actually hurts when you fall in love with somebody or something, and that somebody or something doesn't love you. So that you become consumed in that energy, that you're creating, because it has no outlet. And when energy builds and builds and builds up, a lot of times it could cause what we call a spontaneous combustion, right? Well, hate is the same way. You know what I'm saying? Whereas though hate can eat at the soul, you know what I mean? Like uh, love causes the soul to evaporate when you're being devoured by love, right? And in turn, that causes your heart to get turned black or cold or whatever the case may be. Well, hate on the opposite spectrum is still a lion, right? So what hate does is it eats at the soul. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, those two elements being used wrong, like they're not being utilized correctly. So how can those two things be positive? We already know that we can see where love is positive, right? If it's giving back and it's even, and if it's balanced and it's not unsteady, then that's love being right. But hate is a tad bit more trickier. It's a tad bit more complicated, right? And figuring out how to turn hate positive, right? I mean, on a layman's level, we can understand the process of how going about to do it, right? And then once you understand that, you can always cultivate that and elevate that and use that on higher degrees. And one of the key examples that we have of that is you can have a person that hates certain things about themselves, right? And if they have a healthy, positive mind, right? They can utilize that energy and make that energy serve them. You might not like your body weight, so you'll hit the gym and tighten up, or and things of that nature, right? Or you might use it's a lot of things. You might hate the way that you think. You know what I mean? Like you may feel like, oh, I hate being ratchet, or I hate that a lot of times when I talk, it's not intelligent. I come off uncouth, a little rough around the edges, and I just want to refine myself, right? And so you can use the hate of those, which you may consider flaws or defects in your character, and you can use that energy to perfect yourself and make yourself better. So in that aspect, right? But hate is, you have to be a real master to be able to benefit off of hate. I remember years ago I was in a situation, right, where as though I was incarcerated, and I was in a place where there was a lot of hate, right? And I don't know how I figured this out, but I actually figured it out in the sense of I figured out how to utilize hate to my benefit, right? So, and what I would do is like I first learned it from working out. I would go in the yard and I would run the track, right? And when I first started, of course, the hecklers, the haters, they used to be like, "Oh man, okay, I see you out there running." You throwing all the little barbs and little insults on a slick way, right? Not blatantly disrespectful because they knew better than that, right? But you was still, even from your comrades or your close associates, right? Because hate is a thing that lurks in many dark hearts, right? So, and I could remember going out there, and first I would start 4 laps, a mile, then I would run 2 miles. Then the next thing you know, it turned to 3 miles. And I could remember when I got to the point where I learned how to utilize other people's hate and tap into their energy and take their energy away from them and utilize it for myself, right? And it was a time I had went out there, and I said to myself, you know what, I'm gonna run the whole 2 hours, the whole track. No matter how tired I get, I ain't gonna stop, right? And I could remember running, and by the time I got like 20, 25 laps in, right? I noticed every time I would run by the bleachers, in the beginning it was a little this and that, and then I could remember by the time I got up in my high numbers, I could see the transition of power. I could see where I took their power, because now it was like shock and disbelief, and they was just like, and right before their eyes, I became greater than them on that level, right? So I just start once I learned that actually became a tad bit intoxicating for me, and I learned how to utilize people's hate against them. Stars do it all the time, right? Like what I mean by stars do it all the time, I let a little secret out. A lot of times these stuff where you be hearing about stars and crazy stuff that they don't done and stuff like that, that's actually to generate hate. That's actually to generate hate, right? And then what they do is they utilize that hate, because that when that hate comes, and 9 times 10 when they do it, they'll put out a lie about themselves, or the media put out a lie, a smear campaign, right? And then people will believe it. They'll talk about it, office places, street corners, and things of that nature. And that energy builds up, and then it's rechanneled, directed at the star. But because it's falsehood and it wasn't real, it was something fabricated and manufactured, right? When that energy comes to them to destroy them from the dissatisfaction and the hate of the people, when it actually hits them, it doesn't hit their target, and they be waiting to receive that energy. And then they have systems that they know how to convert that energy over and make that energy serve them. So in that aspect, in that light, that's a prime example of how hate can become positive if you know how to utilize it. But I wouldn't suggest that for everybody, right? Because you have to have a really, really rational and sound mind to pull that one off, right? So, with that being said, I don't want to be too long winded because I can't be long winded and I can talk like for hours upon hours, right? That's why I be like longing, like just to like chop it up with somebody and just like bust it up. I'm really thinking about like just put my phone number out there and just I be honest with you, I want to create a system where people can just call me, right, with stuff like not just ideals, but like things that may be bothering them, or people who just want some understanding on certain things and some wisdom. And I would love more than do that. And I would really love if I could make a living off of that, right? Just being an advisor, right? So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and do what I do. Like my man Beanie Siegel once back in the day, he had a song called "I Don't Do Much." I'm just gonna go ahead and go back in my space and up in my head and just zone out. But until the next time I get the urge or they call me back up and try to put me in front of the firing squad, man, I'll see y'all then. So y'all have a beautiful day, man, and try to be more balanced in your life with your love and with your hate. And with that, peace.